Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. I guess my sources were right after all, including where the starting point of the Pioneer format was, if you watched my video yesterday, as well as my live stream with the Magic Historian. We talked about the Pioneer format, how I was given a heads up about this format as the Wizards Event Reporter was showing a Pioneer format, and it had the exact same stats as Modern did, meaning that it was a 1 versus 1. It wasn't a casual format, wasn't multiplayer, wasn't draft. And we started speculating it, and I also had some other information about the Return to Ravnica Forward, which I wasn't too sure of, but lo and behold, my sources are correct. This is going to be a format with Return to Ravnica Forward. So I'm here to talk about today why this is the real deal. Twitter is being stupid as usual. I'm going on to Twitter and looking at all the people suggesting that the Pioneer format is just going to fail like Frontier. Now, back up 2 years ago, I was one of the most outspoken people about Frontier. I supported it like crazy, and I even said then and there that Frontier would flame out unless we got Wizards support. Well, lo and behold, Pioneer is exactly that. It is Wizards support. And there have been some formats that have failed, like Brawl, with Wizards support. However, I don't think this is going to be one of those formats because that's all it needed. The spikes are going to go to where the tournaments are. The tryhards are going to go to where the tournaments are, and Wizards can announce any sort of format at a Grand Prix or a PTQ or anything that will get the people to compete, and people will come in droves to compete in that format. Plus, Frontier was always a pretty fun format. I've always wanted a Modern Light, something that wasn't as degenerate as Modern. We don't have the plague of 8th edition cards, especially like 8th edition and Kamigawa and Mirrodin. All of those blocks had some very, very degenerate cards. There's a whole different way of how they make Magic cards right now. It's a lot more balanced. There's a lot more restrictions on like casting costs of cards, and not a lot of shenanigans. Well, there are plenty of shenanigans that can be done in Pioneer, but not at the wonky power level, the non-interactive power level of Modern. So for me, I'm thinking I'm going to enjoy this format a lot. And just as I suggested earlier, I think others are as well. And it doesn't matter anyway because Wizards is going to support the crap out of this format. So first of all, it's a Magic Online events are coming right now. You can actually do a Chaos Draft just to get familiar with the cards in the Pioneer format from this Return to Ravnica to the Throne of Eldraine. And of course, they'll be adding sets when new sets come into it. And then with the fetch lands being banned, it's also going to make the color pie relevant. So you just can't play 4-color good stuff like what was happening in Frontier. And I actually think that was one of the plagues of Frontier were the fetch lands. So that's going to be interesting. It's also going to keep a price point pretty reasonable for the Frontier because if you actually, or Pioneer, because if you actually look at Modern, the vast majority of the cost of Modern is in these fetch land cards. So when you get rid of the fetch lands, yes, there are some lands that will go up in value in Frontier, or in Pioneer, I keep calling it Frontier, possibly like the pain lands or the check lands could go back up in value. Regardless of that, though, it's going to be a lot more fair mana. It's going to be a lot more restricted mana, and it's going to be a lot cheaper on the mana base. So again, there are plenty of times this is going to be showcased here. They're going to have PTQs that are going to be running the Pioneer. There's going to be Grand Prix, or what they call Magic Fests, that are going to have the main events being Pioneers. I believe it's not the first or the second, but the third, fourth, and fifth of the next year are all going to be showcasing Pioneer. And there's just going to be a lot of support. So that is the difference between making and breaking the format, is when you don't have a format like what happened with Pauper when it was only on Magic Online. Pauper has been flourishing now that it's a paper format as well as a Magic Online format. Or if it's just like a grassroots format, it really has a hard time getting off the ground. Commander's the one exception I can really think of that is EDH at the time. But it really did take Wizards really supporting that format before it really reached its potential. This Pioneer is going to be very popular. And I'm not going to make any predictions it's going to be more popular in Modern. I actually think it will be. So move over Modern. I think we have a better non-rotating format that starts at a better place in Magic without a lot of very degenerate cards in its history. The start point of Return to Ravnica does allow cards like Thoughtseize and Mutavault that can become problems, and like of course Kaladesh had a bunch of cards, but they've already announced that they are going to be looking at this and have a very aggressive ban list policy. So what also makes this kind of interesting is the starting point with Pioneer is exactly where we have what I call Magic 2.0, where they really printed the crap out of standard sets. So the supply of Return to Ravnica forward is very, very high, and that should also keep the cost down. So, of course, this is a market video, so we're going to be talking about where I would like to focus on of investments. Right now, the market is going absolutely nuts. There are people that are buying out particular cards. In fact, we found some little bit of insider trading or people that has had the knowledge before I did about what this format would entail. Cards like the Smuggler's Copter were already bought out in various places. I had a private message sent to me on Twitter that a store near him was actually had 100 cards purchased from a vendor. So a big vendor, Star City Games, purchased from their local game store 100 cards about a week ago of the Smuggler's Copter. So we already have the information going around. Insider trading is a little bit of a, like the one thing that I really do think this is insider trading is people knew the exact starting point. So I was quoted and the people kept telling me, no, it's going to be Return Ravnica. And I'm like, well, that just doesn't make sense. I would say like maybe the border change forward, which would be Magic 2015. That's when they started putting the counterfeit stamps on it and slightly changed the bottom of the border. That made a good point. Or the Shadows of Innistrad forward also made a lot of sense because that was already programmed into Arena. So that makes me think that there absolutely was insider trading with Return to Ravnica. But before we get our pitchforks out, could have just been a guess. And the people, apparently it was October 13th when the first thread I can find about people talking about how they discovered Pioneer. So it's been around a while. It took me a while before my sources came forward with the Pioneer format and whatnot. But again, it is very suspect of insider trader. However, going back to the market is going nuts with these staples: Looter Scooter, Jace, Baby Jace, Aetherworks Marvel, Emrakul. All those have just gone nuts. I think people should step back a bit here because this format, we have no clue how it's going to evolve. And yes, decks that were good in their standard formats will probably be very good in this. And yes, decks that are very close to modern base decks are going to be very good in this. But we could also see cards that weren't very good in either, like in modern, like maybe like Dragonlord Ojutai, for example, all of a sudden become just a powerhouse in this format. And we could even see decks that weren't powerhouses in Frontier all of a sudden become powerhouses in this format because of just little shifts in the card pool can make a huge difference of what's viable and what's not viable. So before you go out and just buy all these like busted cards that had to be banned in standard, just keep in mind there's more things going on in this particular format. Over in my Market Monday channel, or my Rogue Market channel, I suggested the targets you should be buying is the hate cards, because hate cards have the most chance to, let's just take a look at modern here. Hate cards have the most chance of being in the most decks. So if we actually go format staples and we go over to modern, you'll see many of these cards will be like the hate cards. Right now, not so much. But oftentimes these top spells will actually be hate cards like Stony Silences. You'll see as like, oh, Stony Silences is the 7th most played card. And that's because it just goes in so many different sideboards. So I'm expecting the exact same thing to happen in the Pioneer format. So I highly suggest you come over to my Rogue Market channel, give it a subscribe, give it a bell ring, and keep your eyes peeled for more content, because I'm going to be hitting the Pioneer format extremely hard over the next week. In fact, I'm going to do a set analysis of every set from Return to Ravnica and see which cards I think have the ability to see play in the Pioneer meta. So right off the bat, you can come over here to MG Goldfish and people are starting to put decks out. You can see a lot of the classics here. There's a blue-red tutelage that was popular during the core or the Origins. Mill actually looks pretty good right now with Eldraine having some strong mill cards, as well as things like Manic Scribe from the Delirium card that mills 3 every turn. Those seem to be very, very easy to enable. The Teamer Aetherix Marvels, the black-green Deliriums, the Abzan Rally. Looks black. You have another black-green Delirium here. Some combos. Kethis combo because it even gets more busted. This was a standard deck that just rotated. Plenty of zombies-based decks. If you go over to Frontier, Vampires Tribal is very powerful in Frontier. There's a lot of red aggro-based decks. There's like Wizard Tribal, Hardened Scales, Hardened Scales plus 1/1 robots. Is definitely something that can work. Dragons is something that work. There's Scarab God that's still in the format. The list goes on and on and on of viable formats. And again, we just don't know which ones are going to surface as the tier 1 decks. And we don't know exactly how well this meta is going to be adjusting to those tier 1 decks. So it's going to take a while before all of these decks are going to solidify. And that's why I keep saying that you should be targeting the hate cards because they're the only known information. You don't know if Baby Jace is actually going to be a powerhouse. Maybe there's just something that keeps it back from seeing as much play as we think it will. There have been plenty of cards that we thought were going to break Modern or really be good in Modern, and they just fall flat. I mean, look at the Phoenix, Arclight Phoenix, when the Faithless Looting is banned, all of a sudden it was like one of the most dominant decks in Standard or in Modern, going down to very low play in Modern. So little things like that, we don't know exactly how it's going to work out for the format. So anyway, let's just discuss Pioneer more in detail of what I think is going to see play right off the bat. Maybe we'll just look over these particular decks and see where they're going. This should be a fun thing. Oh, one thing I wanted to say, this isn't popular, huh? 64 pages of Pioneer submitted decks from when this started at 11 o'clock. I believe it's 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock, I think was the announcement. So 10 o'clock Pacific Standard Time was the announcement. And now we have 64 pages. What is this? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So about 30 decks per page here. A little less than that times 64. That's how many user submitted decks have been submitted on MTG Goldfish. This is an insanely popular format. I mean, Modern didn't take off like this. Oathbreaker didn't take off like this. When new commanders are spoiled from the latest sets, or even new standard doesn't take off like this. This is a lot of energy. It's a lot of hype. You can tell in my voice that I am hyped by this. I haven't been this perky about building a Magic the Gathering deck in a long time. We get to go back to some of my greatest hits, the Rogue Deck Builder Greatest Hits album, and try to upgrade those into more of a it's perfect because I started Rogue Deck Builder during that time period. That's when, that was the creation of this channel. And so you'll be getting a lot more brews from me. I'm going to try with, like I said, some favorites. I'm going to go back and, do the Rally the Ancestors, Return to the Ranked type decks. I definitely am looking at Hardened Scales and Snake deck. I'm looking at Dragons for sure. I think Dragons look pretty cool with Sarkhan from the M19. Vampires look pretty fun, but we'll even go back and look at some even more wonky decks that we've done in the past. I mean, there's been some fun decks like the Unexpected Results. There's one, or Epic Experiment. There's another one. Epic Experiment seems pretty good in this format. The only reason Epic Experiment does not see play in Modern is there's just a little bit better ways to storm off. However, in this particular format, Epic Experiment might be a pretty potent card. So there's a lot of those particular cards that we can start looking at, and just stay tuned for that. Like, again, I'm going to do analysis over at the Rogue Market channel for every set and the cards that I think are viable. So let's see if we can identify any sort of popularity here with these type of decks. Finding a lot of rock decks here. So black and green. This is a dominant deck during its time period. This is also one of the time periods where Standard was probably the most strong. Kaladesh and Shadows. I don't know if there was possibly before that Battle for Zendikar. No, I still say that overall power level probably Khans the Tarkir and Return to Ravnica. So the very first of it had some incredibly powerful cards. Theros and Khans was pretty good. Theros Return to Ravnica was actually pretty strong too. So Return to Ravnica and Khans wasn't together. So both of the Theros was kind of a weak set, but it was sandwiched between two extremely powerful sets. And then after Theros was, so Khans, and then after Khans was Battle. So yeah, I think Battle for Zendikar Shadows was one of the more strong ones. Khans Battle. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think that time period is probably where standard was the best. Yeah, Coco time, I would say. So I would start at a baseline with there and establish a meta and then start moving outwards. So this is just based upon a deck that pretty much existed, just a Delirium-based deck that existed during the Shadows Cons era Shadows Battle era, and is running the Ishkana, the Graph Widow, was known for just a huge roadblock. And then Tireless Tracker, very, very good card. And these are the other cards that I would start to target, is the ones that can just go in so many different decks. So Thoughtseize could go up in value. The thing is, like, how much do you weigh how much this format, the cards that already are staples in Modern, how much more will these push the cards? I think we're going to see some initial burst in cards that double dip in Modern and in Pioneer. So even cards like Thoughtseize are going to be very, very heavily played, and it could get a resurgence here in these decks. So you have like Abrupt Decay and Assassin's Trophy in this format. And then we have even things like Deathrite Shaman. Like Deathrite Shaman probably wants to be in this particular deck that's going to be feeding the graveyard with Grim Flayers, and then ramp into other stuff. But this is just a very, very easy stock list, nothing too snazzy here, no sideboard even this particular deck, but you can kind of see how these people are starting to run with it. The Liliana Last Hope and Tireless Tracker, that was a known deck in Standard at the time. And Scavenging Ooze is a very interesting one, because this is one of my picks for hate cards that I think has the best potential of going up. The only problem with Scavenging Ooze is they reprint this quite a bit, but I think this is a lot more powerful of a card in this Pioneer format than it even is in Modern, as the single target exile is, like, a lot of times in Modern you just need to do a blanket exile the graveyard, whereas in this format the single target exile is going to be very, very potent, and then as well as ticking up your ooze and gaining life is also going to be very good against those life gain decks. So it's going to be a twofer. It's going to help versus the aggro decks, as well as help versus the sort of Delirium decks or graveyard based strategies. And this is a pretty good beater. Scavenging Ooze gets huge especially in mid-range wars. This as a 2-drop that can really start to outscale all of what your opponents are doing. So I really do like Rock. I think Rock is going to be the center point. It's going to be the Jund of, so Rock is just green-black is what we call it in Magic. So it's going to be the center, kind of the center mid-range deck that holds the format together, and it can be that 50% deck. It's just good against 50% of the field. So I'm liking this list here. Let's look at some other user-submitted decks here with the whips. Remember the Whip of Erebos deck? So this one is trying to whip out some Ashen Rider is good in the format. So this is actually a pretty good reanimation target too. And we actually have some pretty nice reanimation spells lately that have been printed. So Ashen Rider can be cheated into with the cards like, what's the Ilharg? Think of Ilharg out of War of the Spark, cheating into Ashen Rider. Some of these like later sets, like War of the Spark, we didn't have a lot of payoffs for ramp. And now we have some really good payoffs. And think about Ashen Rider with Aetherworks Marvel. That's pretty decent too. I know that people have been going with like Ulamog for that, but Ashen Rider could give even another bit of oomph to the Aetherworks Marvel deck. So this is definitely one we should pay attention to, is the Ashen Rider for kind of the degenerate decks. So kind of neat little deck here with Haunted and Prized Amalgam, and then just Whip of Erebos, and a lot of ways to fill up the graveyard. And so there you see that the graveyard hate probably will be a necessity. Another card that I'm assuming is going to show up in a lot of numbers is Pithing Needle and a Braid. Would Oko be that big of a deal in Standard if we had a Needle? I'm not sure. So a lot of the Planeswalkers too, it's a way to shut down Baby J, so just a turn 1. And was this card, I don't believe this Pithing Needle was in Frontier, because Baby Jace did dominate Frontier for a while. Yeah, I don't think it's been printed. So this is another card that I think is surprising that this card hasn't spiked up in either online, or I guess it is spiking right now in online, but in paper, because I think it does answer quite a bit of cards. So again, this is how I started to identify the first wave of cards, because these are going to get the most pressure being in sideboards. Tormod's Crypt's another good one. It's been going up even for Modern lately, just for an easy way to get rid of the graveyard. And yeah, Needle and a Braid, very, very good sideboard-based cards. Alrighty, let's go back to some other neat little list here, see if I can find one. So Soultie Constrictor, this is kind of a deck that I wanted to build. Looks like this person has really focused on the Eighth Revolt time period. If you even go back, you can find some more. So not having Hangerback Walker in here, I think, is of course a mistake if you're going to go no hardened scales. And 2. Nah, you want to go all out on hardened scales if you're going to commit. So Winding Constrictor, Hardened Scales, Walking Ballista, this is exactly the type of deck that I have been wanting to mess around with. I don't think I have room for Rishkar in the particular version that I am running. There are the X spell that just came out of the latest Throne set, just the 1/1 protection from multicolored. That looks pretty good in Hardened Scales deck. There is just the... As far as artifacts or Hardened Scales robots are concerned, you still have Steel Overseer. There are a lot of ways to put +1 counters on cards that have been printed recently, there's a couple of the Johnnies that put it on all creatures. There's a Nissa that puts it on all creatures. You have Nissa, Voice of Zendikar here. There are plenty of spells that can also give Indestructible and +1/+1. Is it only until a turn? No, it's a +1/+1 counter out of Ravnica Legions and Indestructible. And so it's wide open to really, really go down this +1/+1 matters type theme. And I think that this deck could definitely go back and look at some more cards printed. But I think that's going to be a very popular one going forward. A couple of these historic Lichs with Lichs Mastery. So Lichs Mastery's deck to just switcheroo. So with it. So is that what they're trying to do with this, or just keep bouncing it? It looks like they're just bouncing it to get a lot of value out of it. I'm sure Approach from the Second Sun decks are viable. Yay, I guess. And Nexus of Fate decks are going to be viable for on the heavy end of control. You get cards like Supreme Verdict. They're going to be the go-to Azorius board wipe that I'm expecting to just spike up in value. In fact, this one should be moving, I would say, online pretty significantly. Yep. Supreme Verdict, it has been moving at MTGO. And of course, MTGO is going to be a precursor of what's going to go up in paper because the results and the ability for the market to move quicker is just there for MTGO, where there's just like too much lag in between shipping on paper for the market to move as quickly. Both Teferis, I think, are going to be very, very good. I think Teferi Time Raveler is going to get the nod over Teferi Hero of Dominaria, but I am expecting to just have Teferi Hero of Dominaria as the only win condition decks to that's what it kind of looks like in this one. It's between a Nexus of Fate and a Teferi. We've seen this sort of deck before. We do have like Barl and Goblin Electromancer in the format, so that's kind of going back to Epic Experiment decks. Barl, Goblin Electromancer. We have like a huge artifact theme with Psymaster Thopterus and Saheeli. Wow. Yeah, probably going to 90 miles an hour, but you get my gist. Mono Green's another one I've been seeing a lot of lists of. This just seems to be a very quick kind of stock list. Don't we have the spell? Yes, we do have Aspect of the Hydra. Yeah, this is another sweet deck. So we have a ton of 2-drop green cards right now. Even Tusker. Tusker's in the format, Barkhai Troll's in the format, and Avatar of the Resolute is the format. And we actually do have some triple greens in the form of the Steel Leaf Champion and now with Yorvo. So this can get a massive Aspect of the Hydra out. I've played a very similar deck to this in Modern. It feels like they're not using a card. Yeah, there's a card out of Theros that has... it gets a +1 counter for enters the battlefield, +1 counter for each green symbol you have that I found to be quite potent. In fact, it might just be more potent than Galta. I'm not sure. Maybe Galta is just better when you're running a bunch of 3/3s on a 5/4. But I mean, those type of cards are going to be very good in this deck as well. With the Aspect of Hydra, it's a nice little old school strategy that does occasionally see Modern play. That's another thing you want to really focus on is like these modern decks that aren't quite there, that are the majority of cards from Return of Ravnica forward. Phoenix, I do think will be viable. There's plenty of self-mill. There are plenty of different ways. I wonder if this one's using like Baby Jace Phoenix. Nope. I think this one should be using Baby Jace Phoenix. This just looks like Thing in the Ice, Arclight Phoenix, Goblin Electromagnetic Crackling. So trying to do the standard. This is really just standard with the Thing in the Ice. Hasn't really done much to it. And then going for like Treasure Cruise and Chart of Course. Another kind of sweet card that I identified from M14 is Quicken. Quicken seems to be a nice little cantrip card to go with Opt. And, Quicken into Treasure Cruises are pretty good. You can keep up like counter spells and then Quicken and Treasure Cruise in a turn. So keep that in mind. There are some pretty sweet, even cards that haven't seen play in a long time. Or that's another really interesting little topic too, is cards that might have been too weak for standard at the time because they just didn't have the synergies that were needed, but then just get insanely broken when you add other cards to them. So we have good old Teamer Energy. That was a very popular deck in its time period. It just looks like the stock list with Hydroid Krasis. We're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff. Oko, so taking the most powerful card from this standard and Hydroid Krasis, and then pairing it with the more powerful cards from Temur. We have this, of course, the Healy combo is going to be out the gates pretty quickly, so it's taking the Planeswalkers. This should be running Oath of Nissa. Definitely Oath of Nissa. It's a card I think people forgot about for these Planeswalkers. It helps you, Oath of Nissa just helps you fix your deck as well as just cast your Planeswalkers for basically nothing. Here's another very interesting card, because this is this format's Ponder for green. So, enters the battlefield, look at top 3 cards of your library, you may reveal a creature, land, or Planeswalker card from among them, and put in your hand, put the rest on the bottom. You may spend mana as though they were any color to cast Planeswalker spells. So I think this is definitely going to go up in value again. It went up in value with War of the Spark coming out, but then people realized, okay, where do we play this? Not Modern. So it's not just there for Modern. There's no Planeswalker Tribal there. So this might be the format where Oath of Nissa just really, really shines. And I mean, this is pretty cheap to still get him with your Card Kingdom credit you've got left over. I mean, it's cheaper right now than it's right there with the market price. And I think in this particular deck, I mean, this is how it works at first. People are going to come up with ideas, and then they're going to be fine-tuned. It's going to take people looking at them like, wow, Oath of Nissa works really, really well just to fix this. And get this going for these particular Planeswalkers. Possibly they don't even want it, but I mean, Oath of Nissa is just good to find your combo pieces after that, because you get top 3 cards, creature, land, or Planeswalker. Well, what is this deck wanting to do? It's wanting to get the Felidar combo. Well, how do you get the Felidar combo? It's digging through your deck to find that particular thing. And I don't see its Eldritch Evolution is the one way they're doing it, but I'm thinking that Oath of Nissa, just the 1-drop, is where this wants to be. Anyway, that's going to be kind of my mentality of going through this. Sorry about this video being so sporadic. There are just so many cards that are possibilities that can bust out in this Pioneer field. I think more importantly than just going crazy right now is, remember, there's high supply to these cards, because I mean, they're fairly recent and they're Magic 2.0, and so even if they are popular in this format, remember they were popular in Standard at one point and their price point hit a certain level, so don't expect them to jump up past that level in the short term. What I'd be more focused on is waiting for those results, just really tinkering around with the format, waiting till tournaments start to finish, and then getting in on those cards before the waves of people wanting to build those decks come after that. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for that. There's going to be a lot of MTGO data that's going to be coming out. Yeah, if you're interested in too, for my patrons, I'm trying to hold a patrons inside tournament, so in-house tournament for the Pioneer format. So I do want to use MTGO, and I've had a little bit of backlash from some of my patrons that would like to do a tournament but not MTGO. However, I think I'm going to stick to my guns here. So we're going to do an MTGO based tournament for patrons, and just basically build a Pioneer deck, and we'll get enough people together, and I have a Ultimate Masters box topper I'm going to give away as a prize. So everyone who is a patron is eligible, so I have some for pretty low tiers that you can sign up for if that sounds like something fun. I think I'm going to start doing these more often, maybe pick a theme or pick whatever for a tournament, and then do these in-house tournaments. It's just a lot easier than trying to go to the whole internet with a tournament. It's something we can handle on Discord, and I think it would be pretty fun to give back to the patrons that supported me. So if you're interested in that, come check out my Patreon, and we'll have more information about that tournament coming up shortly. And if you happen to be in my area as well, here in Richfield, Utah, highly doubt you are, but if you are in this area, we are going to be hosting a Pioneer tournament in 2 weeks. And again, same prize, free entry, and we're giving away an Ultimate Masters box topper to the winner. So free entry, come play and have some fun exploring this Pioneer format. Again, you can tell my excitement, haven't been this excited for a format, for brewing, for speculating into cards in a long time. And this is, good news if you are an old school fan of Rogue Deck Builder. You should see the brew gears really churning here in the next couple of weeks. Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.